right. You ready?
I'm ready.
We are back.
Yes.
Welcome to Fish Taco Fridays with Scott and Michi. I am Scott.
I'm Michi.
And that is not the name of our show. At this point right now, we are still deciding on a name, and hopefully by the end of this show, we will have, announced it. You think?
Something official, yeah.
Something official, yeah. We pretty much got something.
Yeah, we're gonna announce it.
Yeah, we're just gonna announce it. It's not
it.
like we're gonna decide during this show whether to go with the name or not. We have the name. We're just not. We'll announce it at the end of the show. All right. So last week it went well. The audio, it got a good vibe. And first of all, I want to apologize to you because I kind of jokingly made fun of you because you showed up with those AirPods, the 2008 iPod,
yeah,
those, and I was like, what are you gonna do with those,
right, right.
And then I also joked that you didn't have notes,
right?
So I showed up with the studio headphones,
yes,
and I showed up with my notes,
and I showed up with my notes as well.
Right, this week, yes, but last week, and I just wanted to point out, although I came with all that, when I did the editing and I listened, your voice is what dominated. It was nice and clear, and you said don't worry about the notes.
I'm off the cuff.
Right, you said I'm off the cuff, and it was me with all the notes in the studio headphones where my voice, it wasn't bad, but I have to recognize the room for improvement, and plus it's all about improving the podcast voice.
Yes,
so
definitely.
So I recognize that my
it's
voice.
in the throat.
Yeah,
it's about the throat.
Yeah. So I wanted to I recognize that towards the end of my statements, my voice would die out a little bit, like if I was holding my breath while I was talking. So okay. I don't want to do that, just so none of the pieces get cut off. And this one's gonna sound a lot more clear. And I'm definitely working on improving my voice and to step it up where I could be on that level of you, because you're a ringer, actually. Because I thought about this, like you've been on the microphone. You're a singer.
Yes, and I've also done a lot of like public performances, stage performances where you're taught to project your voice and all that jazz. So I think that is very typical of people to take something like this and assume that it's like regular everyday speaking. The same applies for the phone, because I had a lot of jobs. People that have jobs that are like phone banks, that like whatever, telemarketing, right. They're actually trained to speak a lot slower than they typically would. In actuality, it sounds clear and it lands on the other side. So
and
that's my constructive criticism to you, is that just have the patience,
yes,
to say every word clearly.
Patience is what I do.
Oh no, it's your superpower.
Yes.
We've clearly established that. But just say every word. And again, it sounds weird to us because it's not the way we speak every day. But to the potential listeners,
right,
they love it. They're gonna love it.
Speaking of potential listeners, we've got we set up social media accounts.
Yes, Instagram, right? Facebook.
YouTube account.
Yes.
Which we've used to break down clips and kind of give little teasers, little snippets.
We were busy this week. You were busy this week.
Yeah, because I left here. I was already excited. Last week went well, but then when I got to hear the audio and I got to play around with the editing, I was like, "This is great," and it just took my excitement to a whole nother level.
Raised
where it was
the
like
bar.
Right. So that's our theme: raise the bar, and we'll try to make each episode just a little bit better than the previous one.
Yes.
So earlier this week, we were tossing around topics and things that we were thinking about, along with setting up the social media accounts. And I sent you some topics, and I was like, this is what I'm going to talk about, because what we decided last week, or we realized last week, is that as far as the content and the topics, there's just so much to talk about, right? Mm-hmm. So earlier in the week, I was, I was on a certain vibe,
Right.
and I was like, this is what I'm going to talk about. However, I wake up yesterday morning and grab my phone, and I got a notification from you.
Yes.
And I clicked on it, and I forgot exactly what your comment was, but you tagged me on a post, and it was something to the effect like you got to see this or whatever. So I clicked on it, and this is what I got.
Okay. So got to what? 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 So got to what?
All right, so there's a lot going on there, and my initial response and my comment at the time was, I think I said like, "What in the colonial settler fuck is this?" Right?
Yeah. That was your response. Yes.
Right. So that was my immediate response. But you and I have a thing that we've been doing this for a while on social media where we don't necessarily focus on the post, whether it be something like this or the meme, but we also go down into the comments,
right?
And we widen the lens, and we kind of see how people are responding, and then we also our own responses and the way we kind of unpack it. You know,
right.
Well, tell me about your initial response when you saw it.
I was still in disbelief. Well, my initial response was to show it to you because
you already know.
Because I just needed to. I was in disbelief with so many other things that have been happening. Pretty much in our lifetime. It's like, wow, is this really still happening? Are there still people out there that are this clueless or just lack the sensitivity or the not even the just like no finger on the pulse? And
right.
Anyway, it was just crazy. So then of course, you responded the way you did, and then I was like, okay, yeah, it's not just me. But I know that other comments were along the lines of just pretty much the same. Like, now also when I saw it, I was like, this lady's got to be crazy, But again, that's more of that conditioning, and I'm like, no,
right. You gotta catch yourself. Not
gonna write this off to she's crazy. You have a job, you have benefits. If you're not right in the head, go sit with a therapist. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But that's a topic for a whole other podcast, right? Like the whole state of mental health in this country. But we're not going there. That's not what this is. This is just clearly lack of, like, she's out of touch. And so a lot of the comments were along those lines. And of course I tagged you in it because I was like, we got a podcast coming up. This is going to be a topic of conversation.
So this bumped everything down.
Yes.
Like this we were like, this is going to be the top. This is going to be the kickoff of the episode. So just to get, put a little better perspective, that was a teacher in a high school in Riverside, California. And there was an article in the LA Times that said a Riverside high school teacher has been placed on leave after a viral video recorded by a student showed her hollering and dancing around a classroom in a fake featherhead headdress, sparking outrage from the Native American community, school officials, and local politicians. The video, which was posted online on Wednesday, shows the teacher chanting a mnemonic device, SoCatoa, often used in math courses to remember trigonometric. I don't even know if I said that right, but it's a trigonometry function while stomping around the classroom and making chopping motions. The video has more than 3.7 million views on Twitter and hundreds of reactions on Instagram. And then the school, after this went like triple platinum viral, the school came out with a statement.
And that statement from Riverside Unified School District. A recording of one of our teachers has been widely circulated on social media. These behaviors are completely unacceptable and an offensive depiction of the vast and expansive Native American cultures and practices. Her actions do not represent the values of our district. The teacher has been placed on leave while the district conducts an investigation. The Riverside Unified School District values diversity, equity, and inclusion and does not condone behavior against these values. We are deeply committed to implementing inclusive practices and policies that honor the rich diversity of our district and the greater region. We will be working with our students, families, staff, and community to regain your trust. The Riverside Unified School District Administration.
That sounds really good, right?
Sounds good.
Sounds really good.
Sounds
but
good.
what we started off talking about was that unfortunately this is just a common theme, right? And so are these statements, right? So the statements are pretty much standard damage control practice.
Always.
And because when I read the statement, you sent me the statement later on in the day.
Right.
And when I read the statement, the first thing that came to mind is, okay, is this really the first time that she's done this? Or are we getting the statement because this at the time had 3.7 million views?
It was damage control.
Right. So definitely damage control. But if you think about it, and this is an audio experience, but by the time we upload this, everybody's going to know what we're talking about by just hearing, what the clip we played.
Yeah.
She was well prepared with this foolery.
She had been doing it for a couple years.
Right.
She was featured in the school's yearbook.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
Hold on. You didn't.
This is why notes are beautiful.
Hold on.
I didn't.
She was featured. So after they released the statement, they called out the school district because they were like, you already knew. You featured her in the yearbook specifically for this.
Wow, I did not know
Hold on,
that.
I need to find this for you.
I did not know
so
that.
now they're calling out the school even like BS.
Right.
She was featured in the yearbook with the headdress, with the feather headdress and everything.
Because the in the school statement, it's like they're clutching their pearls. Like, oh my God.
We had no clue.
And they featured it. I'm so glad you pointed that out because that's just like a legitimate reaction right now.
That's the nail in their coffin.
By hearing this. Wow. So yeah, it's like, all right, that statement just went right out the window. Not that it was credible anyway.
Right.
But it just went out the window. And apparently not only has she done this before, but it's a thing for the school.
Yeah, they think it's great.
Yeah, they think it's great. And apparently I'm definitely going to go ahead and assume that any classes before this class were offended just as much. Maybe just nobody really thought to, pull out the phone and click record. But when now, mind you, this clip, this was broken down into clips in one and one Instagram post. So I initially only watched the first clip. Right. I knew there were more clips, but I just couldn't.
I couldn't either.
Right.
I couldn't either.
And I think I got up, took a shower, got ready for work, and then I sat at my desk, and then I played the rest. And thank God I did, because I that would have been too much for me as soon as I opened my eyes,
Right.
And I got the other clips involve when she goes to the back of the classroom, jumps up on a table, and oh my God. And then you get to see the kids. So I initially thought from that first clip that we're talking, that she's, because I heard there was some laughter and I saw the way she was behaving. And I was like, I thought still it was sad, but I thought it was like second graders or third graders.
Right. Yes.
These are high schoolers, right? These are like damn near pre-adult teens, right? You know, so I took my focus off of her and I'm looking at the classroom and one kid has his head down, right?
Yep.
And I don't think he has his head down because he's laughing. He knows that somebody's recording and he's like, and he knows that this is fuckery.
Yes.
You know, so he's really uncomfortable with his head down. Then behind him to his right or whatever, there's a black girl that happens to be sitting right in front of where the teacher is on top of a chair or whatever.
Her face says it all.
It does.
Her face says it
She's
all.
not laughing. She's not laughing, and her face looks like she's really disturbed. Right? And what tells me is if this has been an ongoing lesson, this has been an ongoing teaching practice by this teacher, you can't tell me that you haven't noticed that at least one student in your class each time is really uncomfortable with this.
Yes.
So I go down into the comments because I love doing that. And the reason why I do that is because you get a good sense of the type of people that are in our society by going in the comment section.
Absolutely.
People try to say, you don't really know me. You know what I put on social media. I disagree. I think you can tell a lot about a person by their social media, by their comments, especially in the comments, because people think that you're not really paying attention to the comments, that you're just looking up top to the actual post. Not me. So, you know, and I looked and the immediate reaction was mental health, right? Some type of mental health and drugs, right?
Right.
And I have a problem with that. But I took some, some snapshots of the comments. One says, looks like homegirl had an absolute mental break. This is terrible. And I was like, and then other people were like, for real though. And then somebody said, isn't this a documented breakdown? Dang. And I'm like, I just can't, and then another person says, also seems there's drugs involved. The students are mortified. This is traumatizing.
Yeah. So I just can't. This is what I'm talking about. So like when you have a white woman who's clearly just disrespecting, it's gotta be that she's crazy. It's gotta be drugs. But let it be like a black woman that's got like a gun pointed at her face and she doesn't know how to freaking act. That's, they're unruly. They don't, I can't. This is the fuckery, like you say.
Right. So let me just say this. The comments that I just read were from non-white people. Right? Yeah. So it's not so much as white people throwing cover.
Right.
Right?
No, yeah.
We've got and I'm not saying that they're trying to justify it. They may not realize by dismissing it as a mental breakdown or it must be drugs. They're minimizing it for what it really is, right? So my response to one of them was like, I said she's not demonstrating any signs of impairment. She seems completely coherent and comfortable in her ignorance, right? Because we mentioned this where she had the whole head garb and she had the rocks from the rock god and she mockingly laughed, right? And she even went as far as saying that her kids, I think, painted the rocks or whatever. So she's got props going on in the classroom along with the head garb. And so it's like she just took it to another level. And even if let's just say that she had a mental health condition and for some reason she stopped taking her medication and she began to decompensate. That's not what that was.
Exactly. She's been doing this for a couple years now.
Right.
It's beyond that. And again, even if it's like initially people didn't know, what we know now. I saw another comment where someone was like, can we please stop dismissing this as mental health because we're diminishing, the focus on real mental health issues.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? By chalking up, just ignorance to, oh, she's got to be crazy. No, she's ignorant and she's comfortable in her ignorance, like you said.
And then, when you go through the minimization and the justification, whether people realize it or not. Then we get to some of the white people comments, and there's always one that says, I don't see anything wrong. What did she do wrong? And I think I didn't take a screenshot, but I'm pretty sure, like I said, there's always one. There's always one, and there's more than one, but it doesn't take you longer than 5 minutes to scroll in the comments to someone that basically says they don't see anything wrong or whatever. Now, those people could be, what's the word I'm looking for? They could be deceitful, like they're
instigating.
Right, they're instigating. They're trolling. They know exactly what it is, but I also think that doesn't really explain everything. I think there's a level of ignorance that creates a fog for a lot of white people and some people that are not white. But as far as the white people are concerned, when they say things like that, and this is clearly offensive, and then we just talked about the responses by the students, right? For someone to say that genuinely doesn't really get it, naturally they're not offended, but it's not so much that you're not offended, but you don't have the vision, you're unable to see how that would offend other people. Exactly. Right? Yeah. So I brought me a little clip of an essay. This is by Tim Wise. You know Tim Wise, yes? He's a anti-racial activist. I also play a lot of speeches. So this is one of his essays. This is in the book of, guess what? It's called White Privilege, Essential Readings on the Other Side of Racism. And what he says he has an essay, Membership Has Its Privileges, Thoughts on Acknowledging and Challenging Whiteness. And in the essay, he says, when we hear about things like racial profiling, we think of it in terms of what people of color go through, never contemplating what it means for whites and what we don't have to put up with. We might know about the book, The Bell Curve, denigrates the intellect of blacks, but we ignore the fact that in so doing, it elevates the same in whites, much to our advantage in the job market and schools, where those in authority will likely view us as more competent than persons of color. That which keeps people of color off balance in a racist society is that which whites in control, a truism that must be discussed if whites are to understand our responsibility to work for change. Each thing which they have to contend as they navigate the waters of American life is one less thing whites have to sweat. And that makes everything easier, from finding jobs to getting loans to attending college. He's touching on the ignorance, right? He's touching on the ignorance, the lack of empathy, and at the same time how it elevates whites in general. And we're talking about white privilege. We're not talking about anything about to do with money or wealth, right? We're talking because that ignorance is a form of wealth.
It is.
Right? You get me.
No, absolutely.
It's a form of wealth.
Right.
It's a bubble where these people in the comments are unable to feel what those kids are feeling, what those students are feeling, what that black girl sitting in the back was feeling.
No, absolutely. And I'll be honest with you, when I first saw the clip also, and I just had the reaction that I had, and I have delayed reactions. There's sometimes where I'm just like, and then as things develop,
you gotta process.
Like as things develop, and then perspective, I saw the videos, I saw what was going on. Then they made the statement. Then I found out that the school knew. So it just put the whole thing in perspective. And this is what made me kind of take it to the level that I took it, because I was like, I know this is happening everywhere, right? Like, we're talking about something that is systemic. This is the one that's hot right now. But I found that in Florida, there was a teacher who was this was August 20th. She's
It sounds like we're in an airport.
She was, I know, right? She was caught on camera yelling a racist rant at a parent and a student In North Carolina, just October 8th, North Carolina teacher said Black students would be field slaves without constitution.
Unbelievable.
A charter school in eastern North Carolina is under fire after a lesson on the Constitution last month turned racially insensitive. The incident occurred on September 17th, Constitution Day, when parents said that an 8th grade language arts teacher at Winterville Charter Academy in Greenville told Black students they'd still be working in the fields if it weren't for the country's founding documents.
I read about that, yes.
She had them raise their hand during a constitutional lesson and reminded them that if it wasn't for the Constitution, they would be her slaves, her field slaves. Then there was here, like, you know, and that was in Florida and North Carolina, so that's almost expected, right? As sorry as that
because Florida
statement is. Well,
yeah. Sorry, Florida.
No, but
not sorry.
Yeah, the Petri dish state of America.
The QAnon capital.
I thought you were gonna say another capital, but yeah. But even here in Jersey City, just this past April, we had a teacher at Dickinson High School. They filed the suit in June, April 28th, and April 29th. He went on a diatribe against his students and Black people in general, while he was supposed to be teaching a class on landscape and design. According to the suit and video recordings, Zlotkin called George Floyd a fucking criminal who was killed because he wouldn't comply. He allegedly berated high school students for emulating people that are fucking wrong, that are criminals, and chastised students for whining and crying and declaring that Black Lives Matter. When the student that filed the suit and 3 other Black students objected, he assigned them to write a required essay to explain why Black lives should matter.
I would have jumped on that assignment.
He also allegedly told them that if they did not complete the assignment, he would give them zeros for the final grade. And I remember when this story first broke, because like when the young, you know, girl got home and told her mom about the assignment, her mother was like, "You're not doing that."
Right.
You know, and immediately she like sounded the alarm. So, you know, this just like, it just really put me in that space of, you know, because again, there's this incident with this teacher. Then the whole, you know, district now has a statement and we're gonna, and we don't stand for it or whatever. But then we see that they clearly did. And I'm like, this is what we're dealing with. And I know it's all over. So I just want to remind people of that we're talking about this one incident, but naturally in addressing a much larger issue that I just mentioned 3 cases that all happened within the last year.
You know
what I mean? And
isolated.
like it's just terrible. But anyway, go ahead.
So when I hear this, we're talking about these teachers, and we're just talking about what comes to light and what's being reported.
Yes.
And we know that there's much more going on.
Absolutely.
Especially in some because those of us, people that don't know, like we're from Jersey City, and you just talked about Dickinson High School in Jersey City, and Jersey City is like the multicultural. You know, I'm not going to say melting pot. I'm not going to use that.
We are one of the most diverse cities in the nation. And we've actually gotten that designation officially several times since the early 90s. I think we were even in Guinness for it.
Right. For
being the most diverse. So if in the most diverse city in the nation, you can't have a teacher recognize diversity and be respectful of that, then what hope is there for a kid in North Carolina, right, where they might be the only one of their race or, you know, or their culture or, you know, or their nationality, or a place like Florida, you know, or any other place that just doesn't have that diversity? Yeah,
it tells me that this teacher, and I don't know if this teacher is a long time, you know, Jersey City native, because we've gone through a gentrification process. You know, I mean, we were going through gentrification before gentrification became gentrification,
a thing.
Right?
Yeah.
Right, like we're already like.
Didn't it start like in the late 80s?
Yeah, like we're already on like 2nd, 3rd generation gentrification in Jersey City. Like those of us that are Jersey City originals.
Yep.
That most of us don't even live in Jersey City anymore. We can't. You know, it's just most of us can't afford to, or we can't afford to live where we grew up.
Right.
which was downtown Jersey City.
Yeah.
So it tells me that even if this teacher was like a original, a native, that he may have suppressed his feelings as far as being exposed to all these different cultures and being around people that are different, and which is the opposite of us, because we just kind of took it in and learned from it and absorbed it for what for the beauty in it that it is. Right. But then now we're in a certain era where we're going backwards, right? Where people like this teacher gets to put his foot down, say he's had enough with all this black stuff, right? With all this, with all these people that aren't speaking American, right?
All these people that,
right? So, you know, and to the point where he has no shame, like, because it's known, like people lose their jobs over this shit, right? People lose their jobs and maybe even their careers. And I'm not going to use that term cancel culture, because we're going to have a discussion about that in a future episode. Okay. Because that term is bullshit.
I'll make sure to take
notes. That term is bullshit. But he knows that there's negative consequences behind it. You have to be in a complete bubble, which you might be, right? The privileged bubble. But I find it hard to believe in the social media era where you just, you know, especially when you're going to give students assignments like that, like with no shame, knowing that, you know, a lot of parents check their kids' work, right?
Or perhaps Mr. Zlotkin, who clearly is not ethnic at all, okay,
doesn't sound
assumed that parents would not be checking homework, because that is the assumption that is often made in inner city, you know, schools where you have a lot of different ethnicities, and you know that's like a thing statistically. You know what I'm saying? And maybe he felt like he would get away with it. Oh, this kid's not gonna do it anyway, because you know what I'm saying? Like whatever stereotypes he has about the children in his classroom,
or
because it was I think it was like 3 or 4 students, but only the one parent was the one that actually spoke up. Right. You know, and I'll be honest with you. And I grew up, you know, we talked about this last week. Like we grew up lower middle class, right? But did my parents have time? My parents were working. They like come home, you know what I'm saying? Like they wouldn't check our homework and stuff. Like it's just not, you know.
I actually enjoyed them not checking my homework because it was never really done.
no doubt. Mine too sometimes. But, you know, like it just wasn't a thing. And, you know, when you're a working parent, like you try to do the best you can, right? But so the fact that, you know, this mom could actually like, you know, that's great. But I'm just saying, and then I dare say the same thing about this teacher with her trigonometry, whatever the hell she was doing. You know, like, I don't know what the racial makeup is of her classroom, but did she walk in there thinking, oh, you know, whatever, I don't have to, you know, because I'm white, because I could get away with this? Like, no.
I should also mention, I read somewhere, I'm not totally sure, I can't confirm, but I read that the kid that was doing the recording, that did the recording, was actually native.
Yes.
Right. So
and that's why he started recording, because he felt uncomfortable. He was like I mean,
he might have been ready for her, right? He probably had it. He's probably fed up because this is probably like a pattern already, right? Absolutely. And we're only in October, right? So school just started. He's
maybe he heard a friend talk about it last year, and he was like,
and at the same time, he's like, I'm gonna get my viral moment. I'm gonna get my viral moment because she's gonna fall right into it.
Whoever this young man is,
yes, applaud. Going back to Mr. Zlotkin, and as far as the ignorance and the possible privilege bubble. How about this? How about he was comfortable in his ignorance because other faculty and maybe administrators also share his ignorance, right? So he was comfortable with it because some of those conversations, those side conversations, or those emails, or those Facebook groups, right?
You don't even have to go any further. I had a conversation with a family member who is in the school environment, and she specifically told me she stays out of the teachers' lounge or wherever because they're all Trump supporters. They're all racist. They're all and she's like, and I can't.
Right.
And I can't. She's like, so I just stay out of that room. I go and they're always like, oh, why don't you? And she's like, no, I'm good. She's like, because I can't,
And by the way, people, because I know Trump supporters may get a little offended or whatever, which I really don't care. And
me neither.
But for that, the person you spoke with, for them to not be able to socialize with colleagues and coworkers and have to remove themselves from whether it be teachers' lounges or the cafeteria or whatever, that's a form of...
They have that freedom.
Yeah.
A child can't do that if this is a class that they need
true.
to...
That's very true. But even with that freedom, that's a hostile work environment.
It is.
Right? For that person.
Absolutely.
Where that person is alone or the minority in the way they feel, which is human, decency.
Right.
Like I said, that those type of things typically weren't going on in a place like Jersey City 10 years ago, but now we're in this reverse era where we're like, and I made a joke the other day where, we're heading towards the holidays and it's like we're going to be going into 1952 come January.
Yeah.
And that's not even an exaggeration.
No, it's not. I see it.
It's unfortunate. Any last words on this topic?
Again, I saw it. I couldn't believe it. It's a reminder to me, that there's still so much work to do. And I just like to bring it to the surface, more so for my education and so that I can, because again, my initial reaction was, like, she's got to be crazy, But if I didn't know what I knew about, or if I didn't know what I know about, systemic racism, oppression, colonized mentalities, I would have left it at that. I would have ran with that. But no.
Settler colonial logic. That's a term I recently
There you go.
came
That's
across
what it
in
is.
reading.
Like
Right.
I can't,
Where you conditioned to believe that this is how things are.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Like and it's like no. So it's really more so for my own, growth in this. But ultimately this is happening everywhere. And so to the potential listeners that have children in the school districts or whatever, like, be aware of what's going on. Talk to your kids about what their teachers are saying to them. Look at their assignments, like, really go to these teacher conferences. If you pick up on something, like, trust your intuition. We need to protect our kids from ignorance.
Right.
We really do. And the fact that it's in the classrooms, like, it's just sickening.
And this is where I'm going to end on this. And it's like you just touched on it. You mentioned teacher conferences and, our children. And it when I think about these incidents that we just discussed, it immediately takes me to these teacher conferences, these angry folks that are in these school districts complaining about critical race theory. Right. What they're doing, because none of them know what critical race theory is. Yep. Right. They're saying that, teachers are being accused and principals are being accused of enabling these teachers of teaching critical race theory. And what we're telling them and what some people are telling them, first of all, if you've ever read anything on critical race theory or read things by critical race theorists, it's really deep, right? It's not any K through 12 type of, literature and lessons. Like it was originally created for for law school, right? Because it's a systemic framework, and part of it is in the education system, right? So it's talking about exactly what's happening in the education system. Why these angry folks that are in these meetings screaming no mask and all types of particles flying all over the fucking place, mostly not vaccinated. And what they're complaining about is teachers that are teaching within a framework of diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? Which in English means just common decency, right? So they're angry about that because when teachers and educators, and they've been doing it for the longest, like once they start teaching from this framework,
it's like all the smoke and mirrors of white privilege go away.
Right. And it's painful. It's painful.
It is.
And they're saying that it's traumatizing to the kids.
Oh my goodness.
And you know what? Some of these white kids are already onto it, right? And they're not having it. The younger generation that's coming up because of social media, they're not isolated and they're not groomed to think with that settler colonial logic, right? So some of them are coming home, and some of them, I'm assuming, are pushing back on the ignorance that they hear in their household.
Certainly hoping.
Right?
Certainly
I do. I hope. I have a good feeling about that.
Yeah.
So yes, the younger generation, there's going to be, we already know that there's going to be exposed and influenced by Trumpism, that we see that, happening in real time. But what I do feel good about is that the majority of the kids are progressives at the least, right? And that's frightening for these type of people that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Whew. That was a lot. That was a lot. I didn't.
That was, yeah. I mean, these are the kinds of conversations you and I have.
Yeah.
So I want to see what happens next. This really is a call for teachers and parents and administrators. This is a larger conversation just about the education system in this country, but that's also another topic, and we can have an invited guest for that one.
Right. Yeah, because we know some educators. I actually make sure they saw that.
Yeah.
But this is definitely not the end of this conversation,
No,
unfortunately.
not at all.
So now to get to something that I originally wanted to talk about until, Miss Sokotoa bumped us down, like bumped our original things down. But it's we're going to talk a little bit about the drug war. I shared last week about my personal experience with drugs and active addiction, and now being in recovery for 20 years as of last month. And but naturally, my active addiction involved criminal involvement, right? I wasn't a career criminal,
right?
But my criminal record has some mileage on it, right? Has some mileage on it.
Right,
I'm not a person that spent years and years in prison, but because of the addiction, because of the illness, I was involved in a criminal lifestyle where I did what I had to do to find ways and means to do more drugs, right? And so I want to talk about, as far as the drug war and drug possession, offenses and penalties. And I'm talking about simple drug possession. I'm not talking about like El Chapo status, trafficking,
right,
and nothing like that. So simple, drug possession could be like, $20 of cocaine, a bag of heroin, a few bags of weed or whatever. So I remember at 15 years old, I was on the block that I used to hang out with, and that block was popping. As if you was into drugs and you was into illegal stuff, or you was just into the streets, that block was popping back then. And I found myself right in the middle of it because I felt that that's where I needed to be at 15 years old.
Right.
And I was selling weed. I'll be honest, I was selling weed, and the police ran down the block. And when they did, they came right to me because they were watching. They came right to me. It came right to somebody else that was with me. And long story short, I was arrested. there was a bunch of weed I had stashed up the block. They went right to that because they were watching, and they got that. So we, they locked me up. And when we got to the precinct, they did a strip search, and in my underwear, I had what was left of a bag of weed, which was really a joint, right? Yeah. So by the time that got to court with all the challenges or whatever, ultimately I pled guilty to what I had and not what they found up the block, because that was a whole lot more, right? So one joint, I got probation, right? Well, first of all, let me just break down some of the possible penalties for drug possession, right? So it's possible jail time, possible probation, possibly mandated drug treatment, which usually, at least back then, usually involved a long-term residential program, 12 months, 18 months, 2 years. So you weren't going to jail, but you were being removed from society, right? Then community service, suspension of license, suspension of your driver's license, and then fines anywhere from $50 up into the thousands. We're talking about simple possession, right? So to people that are not involved in this lifestyle or just looking at it like from a real narrow view, anything other than jail time probably sounds really good, right? Even though I just mentioned a lot of things, right? All right. So at 15, my sentence for that joint was probation. I think it was like 2 years. And they suspended my license that I didn't even have yet. I was 15, right? So it's like, we know you don't have a license, but when you do go to get it, it's suspended, right? So that's what they did. I wasn't offered any type of drug treatment or education at 15 years old. Not only because, all right, maybe it was looked at, well, first of all, you're not saying that the joint wasn't serious, because here I am in court. Exactly. Right? So it's not that you're not saying it wasn't serious, but just that environment that I was in at 15 years old, right? So it wasn't even, and I'm not saying that that's something I was looking for at 15 years old, but going back and looking at it now as a practitioner, in the field of addiction, and I look at it, and it's different now. It's definitely gotten better as far, but back then, late 80s, early 90s or whatever, I wasn't offered any type of drug treatment, being involved in that. And I got a $700 fine for that joint, right? Now, when you sentence an adolescent and you give them a $700 fine, you're really saying your parents going to pay for this shit, right? Of course. Because even my little hustling going on, I didn't have $700, right? And one shot to pay that fine. So I remember reporting the probation, and the probation officer would look at me like, are you making a payment? And I'm like, no, like, you for real about that? And I remember going through the probation. Right. I was being drug tested. I don't even think I gave any positive urines, but I remember the damn fine kept coming up, right? To the point where I remember my mom used to send me with money, $25 or whatever, right? So moving on, as the disease escalated and I became an adult, I had a bunch of arrests, petty theft, things like that. Right. But I have two felony convictions. One conviction is for one bag of heroin, right? And I think it was about 1994. My second felony conviction was for $5 of cocaine. $5, right? And those are simple possession charges. And the reason why I was indicted was because at those times and places when I was caught, they were watching, and they were watching the drug dealers, right? It was an operation. So whoever bought drugs from that person, they kind of got caught, swept into that whole case where they're not just going to let you off.
Because it was numbers for them. It was a numbers game for them. Yeah.
So
look at how many we got off the street tonight.
So that particular case, right? $5 worth of cocaine, I got indicted. This was what my sentence was: 1 year in jail, mandatory drug treatment now, right? After the 1 year, not instead of the 1 year, right? Which that was an option then. I didn't get that, right? Mind you, I'm not 15 years old, but I'm still a kid. I'm still in my early 20s. In case anybody doesn't know, like you're still you still have an adolescent brain till like 25, 26,
exactly.
right? So, and plus the fact that the addiction and the drug use being started at an early age, like it stunt my development as it is, right? Yep. So I got the 1 year, I got the mandatory drug treatment, I got probation on top of after the 1 year in jail, and I go into drug treatment. I will be on probation. Guess what? They suspended my license. Yeah, I didn't even have a license because it was suspended on top of suspended on top of suspension. I think I had a license for like 3 months. So they said, well, we're going to suspend it again anyway, even though you don't have it, right? And $1,800 fine for $5 of cocaine. Why am I saying all this? So I'm saying this to kind of shed some light on the drug war perspective with these fines, and where now we know from the data that the drug war, the people that are affected by this so-called drug war, in which is really just a criminal justice and racial response. People that are being impacted and people that are being arrested and people that are going to jail are people of color, right? It's impacting them disproportionately, and people that don't have money, right? Not only just because of their socioeconomic status, but because they're involved in drug use, right? So they, and not saying, I mean, there are people that, they have money, they might have jobs, and they, but I'm talking about from where I came from and from people around me. We were street addicts. Our job was using drugs. Right. We weren't weekend warriors where we had a career, and then on Friday we started out at, at happy hour, which isn't really happy for anyone, but it's an illusion. But I'm just saying that wasn't us. That wasn't me. Right. So we, it starts to impact. I don't know if you ever heard about it, but it's come to light in the last several years. The issue with bail, right? When people get arrested on these low level offenses, it's low level, it's non-violent, that you're not selling drugs, right? We're talking about simple possession, and then people get a bail of $5,000, $10,000, right? And not saying that nobody in that type of situation can make bail, because people have family, but when you get to where I got to a certain point, like your family ain't doing that anymore. They've done that
because they're not enabling.
And it also gets to a point, and this is from my own personal experience, where my mother loved me to death, but she felt more at ease if she knew I was in jail.
Absolutely.
Right? Not that if I was going to jail for a long time, but at least for this moment, I think, and I'm pretty positive, that she was able to sleep a little better. Right? Not happy with the situation, but she knew after a while she got more comfortable with knowing that I got more comfortable with going to jail. Where it wasn't necessarily meaning that I was going to be harmed or whatever. Right? So when people are arrested, they're sitting in jail waiting to go to court because they can't make bail. Right? And they're sitting in jail. Now, if they're going to be indicted, they're not going to court real quick, right? That's the whole process. Has to go to grand jury, and then that's when it finally makes it to court, and you start, making plea offers or trial, whatever it's going to be. And that's a lengthy process. And for people that are sitting in bail, sometimes with $500 bail, right? And they can't make the bail, so they're sitting in jail 3 months, 6 months, maybe 9 months, right? So when it's time to go to court, and when you may want to try to fight the situation, you know, because it may not have went down like the police put on paper, right? They might have thrown, you know, they just might have put some shit in the game because that's what they do, right? And it gets to a point where people have been in jail for so long that they plead guilty, right? And it's not uncommon for people to plead guilty to shit that they didn't even do because they've been sitting in there on that $500 bill that they couldn't make, and they just want to go home. And they tell them, if you plead guilty now, you can go home, or if you plead guilty now, we'll take all that time that you already got, and we'll just give you a little more, and you'll be home by Christmas or whatever. Right. And people jump on it like anybody would, pretty much, right? So that's an issue, right? So then the plea bargain comes, and I just went over what the plea bargains look like, right? Because those were plea bargains. That's what I agreed to. I didn't go to trial and lose, and I got hit with all that, right?
Right.
So now a person that couldn't make $500 bail is getting a $700 fine or $1,800 fine, right? You're suspending their license.
So now they can't get a job.
Right. They can't get a job, or they can't commute.
Right.
Easier to a job. Now here, Jersey City, we're right across the river from New York. Yeah. We got buses and subways and all that, but there's other parts of this country that's not a thing, right? You people need, or the bus may come once an hour or once every couple of hours or whatever, or they got to walk miles, craziness, right? So you take away the license, right? Which helps get a job, get to the job, helps with livelihood, helps get out of the situation they're in, and then can help pay this fine. Right. But you keep stacking the deck against them, right? I'm going somewhere with this.
No.
I see it's building up, and I'm going somewhere with this, and it's interesting. So, I've been clean 20 years. My first 10 years in recovery, I was a fugitive. I had warrants because I never went to that drug program. I did go, but I left. So once I left, because I made a conscious decision to leave, and I knew there were consequences behind it. And my attitude back then is, I'll see you when I see you, right? I had pretty much expected to just eventually go back to jail at some point. I had never thought that I was going to wind up getting clean, right? So when I did get clean, and it was like, okay, it's time to face this. I was like, yeah, not right now, right? Because things are going well for me, and I don't want to see myself. Not necessarily saying that it was going to take me back to drug use.
I know what
but
you mean.
It's going to kind of suck going to jail clean.
Right. And it's like, you're going back to that place where you committed this crime and you're not that person.
Right. I'm not that person anymore. I've not only am I not that person, but I've removed myself from that environment. Right. So to go back to that, not that environment as far as the streets, but go back to jail. Right. That was just a fear, and it was a fugitive warrant where it was a felony warrant. So I was looking at going, because I already did a year, right? So I was looking at like a 5-year sentence on this at the time for the probation violation, and ultimately when I had 10 years clean, Jersey City had this, not Jersey City, the state of New Jersey, but they had it in Jersey City. They have what they do every so often. They don't do it often enough. They have a little clean slate thing.
Yes.
Right?
I remember that.
And I was like, and it's interesting enough also because I mentioned that, I work in the addiction field, and, I have a bachelor's in community human services, and I've been a credentialed alcohol and drug use counselor in New York State since 2008. And around 2013, I have to renew my credential every, you know about that. You work in that, you do the credentialing. Every 3 years, I have to renew. And at the time when I went to renew, the warrants came up, and they suspended my license, right? Which really, really hurt, because I can't do nothing. Not that I can't do anything, but I can't work at the level that I've been used to, and I definitely can't go any further, right? So I'm forced to face what I've been unwilling to face. And it just so happened that at that time, the clean slate thing came in, and it was such a blessing because I had a whole bunch of warrants, right? From low courts, little things, fines that I didn't talk about here, on top of fines in lower courts where they were never going to get that money. Right. And so that clean slate thing was, they made like mock courtrooms in the Armory over here. And everybody that had warrants just showed up, and we went in there. We actually had to stay in there the whole day. Like, we were in custody. Like, we couldn't leave. Right. And we went through fingerprints and all that. So I got all those warrants dismissed, right? So it turned out some of those warrants, I had already did the little jail time, whatever. And they were just still warrants in the system that they didn't take out. So which is part of the reason why they do that, to unclog their system full of warrants for 20, 30 years or beyond. Then there was the one main one that I was talking about, where I left the program, which they couldn't address because that was really designed for lower courts. But what they did was they dismissed the warrant and then referred me to the higher court, which is 595 Newark Avenue. All right. So I go to that courtroom about 2 weeks later, and it has just so happened that everybody that was in a similar situation I was, that needed to go to the higher court, they gave us all the same court date. So the courtroom is packed. The line outside the courtroom is packed. The judge, I've never saw the judge because he didn't even come out, because he was pissed that they sent all those people to that court the same day, on top of what they already had scheduled for that court as far as regular business, right? So it worked out in such a way where the judge never came out, but they took names, everybody there that was there, and then we sat there for a couple hours, and then all of a sudden the clerk came out, started calling our names, and started handing us papers, dismissed, right? And on my paper, it said probation dismissed, right? And I was like, yes. And then at the bottom it is, but you have to pay this $1,800 fine. And I was happy, and I'm going to be honest. I was like, I ain't paying them shit, right? I'm going to see if they forget about it, knowing damn well that they're not going to forget about it. Here's where I'm going with this. Last week, on Friday, before I got here, I get a letter from, now mind you, what I just told you about without dismissal was 2013. Last Friday, I get a letter, and it's a letter from 595 Newark Avenue probation department. And so I already know what it is, right? But I'm because there's part of me that's still about the bullshit, right? There's still part of me that want to try to manipulate situations without the drug use, right? Because that's just part of that I have to continue to work on, right? So I know
you're an Aquarius,
right? Yeah, I guess so. Right?
That's gonna be another podcast.
Yeah, that'll be another one. So I open it up, and it says that I'm required to appear at 595 Newark Avenue, which is Superior Court, right? The same court building as it was back then, old dirty ass building, right? So in my mind now on top of the manipulation, I'm manipulating myself to say, who the fuck do they think they are, right? Telling me that I gotta appear. I'm not on probation, right? Who do they think they are to tell me to come down to that dirty ass building when we're still in the pandemic, right? And I don't even know if they're even operating fully. But you're gonna tell me to come down there, and then now you're gonna tell me why, right? And then in that section, because it's like a computer generated thing. It says in the comment section, it says comments, and it says for payment, use money order, blah blah blah, right? And that's all it says. It doesn't say nothing about fine, but I know what it means, right? I didn't remember how much the fine was. So in my mind, I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna call them up, and I'm gonna give them some issues about this, right? And I called, and I got mad because I'm getting transferred or whatever, and I dialed the extension exactly on the paper. So I got a voicemail, and I left the voicemail, and I was like, I'm just gonna have to call back, whatever, every day until I get somebody, because this is not gonna go away. And so the next day, I get a call back from the woman that sent me the thing. And when I wanted to give her, you know, my attitude and my bullshit, she turned out to be the nicest lady, right? The nicest lady. And she told me, you know, how much the fine was. And my initially, I was going to play stupid and say, oh, I thought that was dismissed or whatever. I don't know why, but I was going to do that anyway, just to be on the book. But then she said, then she said, you know, something to the extent where, you know, she asked me if I was working. I said, yeah, I'm definitely working. And she, you know, she's like, this is from 1998. And I said, oh, I know. And I was like, you know what? That is actually the last piece of my criminal past is, you know, and she was like, I'm going to put you down for $25 a month. And I was like, I'm not going to be paying. I'm going to take care of this as soon as possible because I want to end this. And she was like, I get you. And she was like, you know what? It sounds like you know, I don't even know, but it sounds like, you know, you got your life together or whatever. Mm-hmm. You know, she's like, I'm just going to put $25 because I'm not going to hold you to a higher amount. And then, you know, she proceeded to tell me that it seems that she was tasked, or she was one of the people tasked with tracking down people for this money. And in the sound of her voice, I can hear the displeasure in having to do that, you know. So what I'm saying all that to say, where clearly this is my responsibility, right? But that person I was back then didn't have $1,800. Right? Yeah. And the courts, as far as they know, all they know is that I haven't been arrested since the 90s. I haven't been in jail since the 90s. But nobody's looking at my individual files and cases and watching to see, you know, I mean, and putting it together that, oh, I must have got my life together. I'm just a file, right? I could be that same person, just older now. And I'm still being expected to pay $1,800 for $5 of cocaine. So I'm saying all that to say is, you know, because this is drug war shit.
Right? It is. And it's a drug war for people of color, because when it's happening out in a rural area, whereas white people, it's, oh my God, what did they call it? It's not, then it's what was it?
It's a medical.
It's an opioid epidemic.
Right.
Oh my God. Rural America is dying because of, okay, but then you go into the inner cities where it's mostly people of color and they're, you know, spitting fines left and right. Right. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, again, you know, your mom didn't have it to pay it. A lot of people in rural areas,
and she,
you know,
let
had
me
it
know.
to pay it.
She reminded me, gave me hell, because even though I'm her son, it's like, she used to be like, I'm not paying shit, right? She used to be like, I ain't out there smoking that shit, right? That's how my mom used to get down. Like, I'm not out there smoking that shit. That's you.
Yeah.
So she used to be like, you need to figure it out.
You know what's funny too is that, and my mother all my life, she told all of us growing up, if you ever get arrested, don't call me. Because I ain't going to, no. You're going to spend the night in jail. Go call somebody else. Don't waste your call on this number because ain't nobody going to go. So I remember, you know, telling my sorority sisters, like, oh, my mom always says, and they would laugh. We'd all laugh, right? So one night we all go to West New York. A frat was having a party out there. And we just walked into the bar. None of us were of age, but back then it was like 18 to party, 21 to drink. They'd give you a wristband if you could drink, and then that's how you were able to go to the bar and get served. If you didn't have a wristband, you didn't get served, right? So I walk into the bar, nobody carded me, whatever. Most of us were underage. There was only two of the girls that we were with that were over the age of 21. At about midnight, all the lights come on. Everybody take out your IDs. And I'm like, well, this is weird. Why didn't they check our IDs when we walked in, right? The place was being raided. And so everybody who's 21, get out. And so so then one of them goes outside and they're all nervous because they're like, what do we do? What's going to happen? Blah, blah, blah. So one of them was like, well, let's start calling everybody's parents that's locked up in this thing and let them know. And, you know, she called, oh, Miss Carpena, this is Jeanette, blah, blah, blah. Boom. My mom hung up.
Ooh.
Hung up the phone. And right then and there, the girls were like, Michi, you weren't lying. Your mom really? Like, we were like, oh, we don't know. Oh, well, she knows the deal. Boom. Hung up on us. And I was like, and I had the conversation. I was like, Mom, you really would leave me locked up, wouldn't you? She was like, yeah. But everything that you just shared now just made me think about, like I said, you know, it's a war. They call it a war on drugs, but it's not a war on drugs. It's a war on people of color, you know, because when it's not people of color that are suffering.
And poor people.
Poor, yeah. Right.
And poor people.
Right. You know, that are suffering from this disease that is addiction, then it's an epidemic. Then it's something that, you know, what are we going to do to resolve this issue? And I guess since we also know that a lot of these drugs were planted in, you know.
Oh, that's a whole series. That's a series we could do separate on that. But on the topic of epidemic, what I like to call is when overdoses went mainstream, right? Because there's been several epidemics throughout the decades, you know, to the point where back in the 60s and the 70s, where people were overdosing in the cities and their bodies were just being discarded by, you know, or left rolled up in carpets, old dirty carpets and in the garbage and things like that. So people were dying. People were dying from heroin, you know, for years. But, you know, once we got to this point where we've got these synthetic opioids and this pain medication that the people, the street addict didn't really have access to begin with, you know, and then this whole fentanyl thing comes into play, that really went mainstream. And that's why we have an official opioid epidemic that is a medical issue now.
Right.
That's impacting society. Yes. When the crack era, right, they weren't trying to think of it through any type of medical, you know, healthcare type of lens. Right. You know, it was arrest. We're gonna arrest this problem. Mm-hmm. We're gonna punish this problem, and we're gonna
criminalize it.
And we're gonna fine this problem, which only is solving a problem with another problem.
Yeah, to get into that deeper.
Yeah, because the drug war thing is, and there's definitely gonna be more conversations because that's where I find myself going in my career, where I've moved away from direct care counseling, and I'm starting to I'm a consultant now. So, but I'm also looking at policies and you know and I've shared with you where I'm not really going to say where I work, but we're definitely going to get in some of the things that I'm experiencing and from a policy standpoint. And, you know, as I make plans to pursue a master's degree, that's where I'm going to start looking at, because they're not going to listen. They don't want to listen to me right now.
No, definitely. You know? And something that, like, the first thing that came to mind for me is if you're going to change policy, then you need to also look at the clinical side. Like, is this working clinically? Right. You know, and it made me think about the show that I told you about, The Wisdom of Trauma. You know, because Dr. Gabor Mate is really looking at addiction and all kinds of addiction, not just drugs, alcohol, food, sex, shopping. Yeah. You know, these addictions work, and how trauma is what causes all these things, and how
trauma is the true gateway drug, by the way. Not marijuana. That's bullshit. Yes. Trauma it's not a drug, but you know,
it is
just the way they say, because marijuana has always, you know, as part of the drug war and this propaganda, this whole, you know, the whole DARE thing, you know, where it's always said that marijuana is a gateway drug. First of all, there's no data to support that.
Exactly.
Trauma is the entry level to addiction.
It is. Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And so I asked the question that, because I mean, policy is great, but it's almost like it's the ideal counseling or, whatever the solution is. And so in looking at policy, you have to look at, but is what you're doing at the clinical level working? So yeah, I know that that's something that you're, working towards or whatever. And I thank you also for your vulnerability in this episode, because you shared a lot about yourself that, other people aren't always willing to, open up about. And so it takes something to be vulnerable. So
I thought that was important to bring to this table, the vulnerability, my ability to take a look at myself, because, a lot of this is, just like we spent, the first part of this episode, looking at other people and their behavior, but I don't want it to ever appear like I'm looking down my nose and thinking that I don't have anything to work on, that I've reached, that I have arrived to this point where I feel that I could just criticize and tell people what they should do and what they wouldn't do. And I'm not gonna criticize other people without checking myself, or at least having people check me and me being open to being checked, because that's how we grow. That's how we grow. That's whether it be white privilege, whether it be addiction,
yes,
whether it be trying to break out of this colonized mindset. That's what it's all about. And I thought that would be kind of unique, because there's tons of podcasts where people are talking about, I probably could go on my Spotify right now and find at least 5 different podcasts that are talking about this teacher in Riverside, California, So I wanted to bring that to the table, that vulnerability, because that's what I'm not really getting from podcasts. Maybe from podcast guests.
Right. Yeah.
But not something as a regular podcast host where they, and I thought that would be interesting, because that's my life. I'm not that my whole recovery process is about exposing the thoughts, the thinking as we call it, right? Like I told you about the fine thing, and I was trying to pretend like, I didn't know, like that's the type of thing where I need to expose it. And we also, we recognized last week that this is going to be a therapeutic experience for us.
Yes.
Because we need to talk these issues. And also for me, that's going to involve me getting a little deeper and naked.
Absolutely.
As we said.
We did say we were going to get naked.
Yeah. So I, I'm a little naked right now.
I'm going to have to, and so thank you for getting naked for us.
It's what I do. This is what I do.
I'm gonna have to find something, and trust me, I have a crap load of things that I could totally.
Oh, I know. I know. No pressure. No,
definitely. But
I know.
Exactly. So feel free to be like, Michi, why don't you talk about, not on the spot, but
I'm not gonna like start.
Let me know
probing.
if there's some you want to share, because I'm just I just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
Thank
for just
you.
being that
Thank
open,
you for listening, and
yeah.
thank you for, because it's not everybody that I could just, even though this is gonna go out to the potential listeners, and right now we got like 12 people following us.
I know.
Applaud ourselves.
No. Wait, I think we got more than 12.
Probably got more. Are we getting more as we're doing this?
We got more than 12 followers on our Instagram. We have 16 followers on our Instagram. 7 posts. Yeah. We're
evolving, and it's only episode 0. This is episode 0, by the way.
Why?
Well, because
it's a pilot.
Right. No, the last week was the pilot, right?
Okay.
And we this is actually our 3rd time meeting. So I don't think we discussed this last week, or maybe we did. But
the first meeting.
Right. The first meeting was just us having a conversation without any type of recording or any type of equipment or whatever, just to kind of see how we flow.
Right.
So last week was the pilot, and what I've learned through my research, that the pilot episode, which is usually the pitch, right? The episode to pitch to the corporate networks, right?
Right.
To see if they'll bite and see if they can see if they're going to make money off it, right?
Right.
And then once they decide to take it on and give you an offer for, let's say, one season to start out with, then that next episode becomes the first episode. The pilot is actually episode 0, right?
Okay.
So this is actually episode 1.
Okay.
And as we come to a close on episode 1, we promised that we would release the official name of this podcast.
Drum roll.
Right? Drum roll. I'll find the drum roll. And the name of this podcast is going to be the Which Way Is Up Show. And we agreed on that, and the rationale, the reasoning behind that is, it's real simple. Like the things that we're talking about and all this craziness that's going on in our society and how we're going backwards, it's hard sometimes to sort through the confusion. Some of us don't know whether we're coming or going. Mm-hmm. And we also recognize that progress is an uphill journey, but which way is up may look different.
Yes.
Depending on who you ask, depending on the perspective. So we are going to talk about which way is up according to the way we see it.
Yep.
How's that sound?
No, absolutely. That's what this is all about. That's what we're all about.
That's exactly what we're about. And then we're not saying you got to go this way.
No.
Right? What we're gonna say.
We're just unpacking.
We're gonna unpack
it is up,
right?
Because everybody's coming to the table of these discussions with their own views and whatnot. We're just trying to see if we could figure this out. Right. And we're offering our point of view. And it's not always going to be the same point of view. And, you'll hear him bring up the talking points and you'll hear me chime in and ask questions and, or vice versa. And we're just trying to figure out which way is up.
Part of that unpacking process is hopefully to create a more clear path.
Yes.
To which way is up.
Right.
And what up looks like.
Right.
What upward looks like, that upward journey to a better you, a better me, a better society.
Absolutely.
Better teachers.
Word.
Right.
A better system.
So as we close, this has been great again.
I know. Despite the technical difficulties.
Yeah, we didn't talk about that, but we
can talk about it in the next one.
Yeah, we attempted to get a little more fancy, and we weren't ready yet, so we just kept it simple again.
But we raised the bar.
We did raise the bar
episode.
A little bit. Definitely, it'll probably definitely show, and you can hear it. But as we, tweak and do editing and upload this episode.
Your podcast voice.
My podcast voice, I think it's on point.
Yeah.
We both have headphones now. We can hear each other in the headphones.
Helps us keep our finger on the pulse.
The finger on the pulse. That is very important. Exactly.
Gotta do it.
So as we close, I can't wait to do this again. There's so much more to talk about.
Yeah.
And again, the name of our show is the Which Way Is Up Show, and we're gonna have to change our social media because right now it does say Which Way Is Up, but it's referring to Which Way Is Up Podcast. But we will have all the social medias ready. As far as right now, we have YouTube, we have Instagram, we have SoundCloud for the audio uploads, and we're also working on Facebook, correct?
Yes, and the plan is to release a new episode every other week.
Right.
So yeah.
Right, because we're still operating from a no expectations, no disappointment framework. So we're just gonna keep it simple, and if it causes for us to step it up every week, then we'll do what we gotta do because we like getting naked, right?
Yes.
All right. And with that, we're gonna say
good night,
and we'll see you again soon.
Take care. Be good to each other.
Peace.